Hello and welcome. My name is Nino Di Cara. I'm the founder of Electric Autonomy Canada. And over a 6 weeks period, we're hosting a series of panel discussions with leaders from across the battery and automotive sectors to explore the potential for a national Canadian electric vehicle battery supply chain. In this, the third of our discussion series, we focus on Canada's potential to develop metals extraction and processing capabilities for EV batteries. I would like to thank our presenting sponsor, Invest in Canada. Invest in Canada works with global investors to unlock business ventures and facilitate expansion in Canada. We're grateful for their support for this series. I'd also like to thank our episode sponsor, Frontier Lithium. Frontier Lithium is a TSXV listed emerging pure play lithium company. Its 100% owned PAC lithium project contains North America's highest grade and Ontario's largest hard rock lithium resource in the form of a rare low iron sopidine. Frontier is targeting the manufacturing of battery quality lithium hydroxide in the Great Lakes region to support electric vehicle and battery supply chains in North America. Well, Canada is abundant with battery minerals. What will it take for Canada to obtain sustainably extracted inputs for battery supply chains, primarily for manufacturing here in Canada, but also to supply North America and perhaps the world? To unpack this topic, I'd like to welcome and introduce you to our expert panelists who are going to help set the scene for this important discussion. And if I can invite the panelists to turn on their cameras. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to Brendan Marshall, VP of Economic and Northern Affairs at the Mining Association of Canada. Samantha Espley, President of the Canadian Institute of Mining, Metallurgy and Petroleum. Chris Dornbos, CEO and Director of E3 Metals. Theo Yamago, America's Mining and Metals Leader at EY, who will be moderating our discussion today. Éric Desaulniers, President and CEO of Nouveau Monde Graphite, was not able to join us, but we are pleased to welcome Patrice Bollinger, Nouveau Monde Graphite's Vice President of Business Development, to the discussion. Thank you for Patrice for joining us at short notice. I know it's not always easy to step in. If you have questions for the panelists, please submit them to the Q&A throughout the discussion. You'll see the bottom in the right-hand, you'll see the Q&A button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Please feel free to add your questions as the discussion takes shape, and Theo will endeavour to get to as many of them as possible. But before I hand it over to Theo to lead the discussion, the Honourable Seamus O'Regan, Canada's Minister of Natural Resources, has a message for our audience today.
Bonjour à tous. Je vous parle aujourd'hui depuis l'île de Terre-Neuve, territoire ancestral de Mi'kmaq et de Beothuk. Thanks for being here today. Thanks to Electric Autonomy Canada for hosting. You know better than anyone, Canada has everything it needs to create a sustainable, stable, and integrated battery supply chain for energy storage and electric vehicles. Our mineral resources and our technical expertise offer us nearly unlimited opportunities. We're leaders in producing materials the world needs. No other Western country has an abundance of cobalt, graphite, lithium, and nickel, all essential to creating the next generation of batteries that is revolutionizing and greening transportation. We're the only Western nation with all of them, which means we have a unique opportunity. So we're mines to mobility approach to build the entire battery value chain, from upstream mining and mineral processing to battery manufacturing, EV production, and recycling. There are so many examples to highlight, including more than $375 million to build a national network of EV chargers from right here in St. John's to Victoria. Another $150 million in our Strength and Climate Plan to put more charging and fueling stations where Canadians live, work, and play to make EVs more accessible. We're making them more affordable too, $287 million in new incentives for consumers. Because we have an ambitious goal. By 2040, all new passenger vehicles sold in Canada will be zero emitting. We're also investing in Canada's automakers to retool their assembly lines to build electric vehicles, including $50 million for Line Electric in Quebec to produce lithium-ion battery packs. Then there's $2.7 billion for infrastructure to support electric buses, including $400 million for Ottawa's transit system, which we just announced last week to add 450 zero-emission buses by 2027. We're also increasing Canada's capacity for producing value-added battery-grade minerals, including $5 million to expand First Cobalt's refinery in Temiskaming Shores. Budget 2021 sets us on course to build on this momentum, with nearly $48 million for federal R&D and critical battery mineral processing and refining expertise, another $9.6 million to create a critical mineral center of excellence at Enercan to develop Canadian critical mineral value chains, including batteries. We're cutting the corporate tax rate in half for clean tech companies, helping us get to net zero, like manufacturers of batteries, charging systems, and fuel cell technologies. And we're working with our allies, including the United States, the European Union, and Japan, to build resilient global supply chains and highlight Canada's competitive value proposition as a smart place to invest. Because where and how the metals and minerals are produced matters as much as the technologies that they support. Positioning Canada as a secure, reliable, and responsible supplier of critical minerals, including battery metals and rare earth elements. It's a long list, but it shows we're all in on critical minerals, on batteries, on electric vehicles, because metals and minerals are essential to lowering emissions, essential to net zero by 2050, essential to our economic competitiveness and to our energy security. It's how we double down on our common mission. Net zero emissions by 2050, a prosperous economy that continues to create jobs, and a low carbon future that leaves no one behind. I know that's a lot. I know it's ambitious, but we're Canada. It's what we do. Thank you.
Thanks for this. There's a lot like the Honorable Minister is saying. And Patrice, I'd like to turn to you first on the first question here. You know, he said that where and how the minerals are being extracted matters as much as the technology being used. What's your opinion about the current state or the trending in terms of capabilities when it comes to extraction and processing?
Thank you, Theo. I think what's obvious right now around the earth is Canada is recognized as one of the preferred jurisdictions for mining businesses. And I think we're doing extremely well. And this is how we have valued Canada throughout the world in this scheme. What is important to understand is it's not only the mining operation, which is critical for the lithium-ion battery supply chain, it's also the processing capacity that you put in place to refine those minerals. In many cases, at the ore level, it can be used at a certain level, but then refinery and processing plant need to be put in place and have the infrastructure to support the future of the lithium-ion battery material. And in addition to this, it's important to recognize that the minerals that are extracted today may not be the ones in the future. So we always need to be at the forefront of it. Currently, there's a lot of emphasis put on cobalt, nickel, lithium, namely. But as you have seen through times, cobalt has been put a little bit more aside at the expense of new material like manganese and others that will come on stream. So once we will have achieved a certain maturity into this field, we need to keep in mind that new minerals will come at play. And this is where I think Canada will be able to position itself slightly different than other jurisdictions, which have really put a lot of emphasis on lithium, for example, or graphite in certain extent, because I think we will have more flexibility because of the reserves we have into our ground. So that's one key thing. The next point is really the talents. I think we have a lot of mining talents on board because we are used to dig the earth and extract the ore. What is missing currently is talent which is linked to the value added of these minerals. This is highly critical, where we need to attract and educate our own people so that they can fulfill the needs of the economy, and especially for the refining economy for years to come. And this will be really a key essential point. And I'm not talking about recycling here, because at the end of life, some of those minerals will be reused and some of the knowledge will be applicable as well. From an investment point of view, I think it's clear that billions of dollars needs to be included or involved and pushed into this economy in Canada. Right now, we see a few runner-up which have, let's say, a deeper pocket that can deploy some capital. But for junior mining companies, it's very difficult to go from a small scale level to a large scale level, because also OEMs are not looking at small volume, they're looking at significant volume. So to roll up a new mining exploration project, you need to have a decent sized mining operation and refining operation. Otherwise, you're not going to be, let's say, even considered, because they want to have more significant suppliers so that it's becoming more robust. From an R&D point of view, I think I've touched the point already. There is always evolvement into this, where we see silicon playing now a bigger role into the anode and other materials. So we need to always be at the forefront. So for this, R&D investment needs to be put in place, obviously. And I think what's going to be the pivotal point is we need to really break this ecosystem of inertia that we have currently in Canada. We haven't seen a big project being launched where it's going to pull a lot of other company and businesses. So I think this announcement is just about to happen. I think it's going to happen in 2021. And here, I mean, probably a big gigafactory being installed in Canada, having capital, which will secure supply chains from Canada and the US. This is what we're going to have to happen soon, so that many of those projects can really emerge from their, let's say, feasibility study level that we're at right now. So this is how I see the critical battery mineral extraction processing capacity right now in Canada.
Okay, thanks, Patrice. I'll get back to you on some follow-up later on, because the audience questions are already on fire here, and something to do with what you just said. Chris, I know that you at the forefront of how competitiveness operates in this country, because you're seeing it day in, day out. In your mind, what's the time frame that we should be considering to actually stay competitive, but at the relevant level of urgency? Like, how do you see that, Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Theo. E3 is at sort of we're at the forefront of a lithium industry. We're a raw material producer aiming for lithium hydroxide. So on that side of things, this is what Canada does very well, is produce raw products. And I think that, it is the sort of foundation if we're going to grow as a Minister of Energy, or sort of Minister of Natural Resources. The Honorable Seamus Éric was talking about earlier in his chat about, it's what we do, it's a core business. But I think that looking at this from a holistic standpoint, it's very rare to have the opportunity of this sort of market growth, and to actually have some vision of that. And some hindsight ahead of the game. And I think that that's an incredibly important part of where where Canada can grow. And it is important that the country acts now, because with a growing market, there are gaps forming, and we can fill those gaps using Canadian expertise. And we do that on the mineral side, and there are companies in our world that are advancing projects, and some other fellow people on this call doing the same thing. But if you're looking at the ecosystem of an electric vehicle and the battery supply chain, Canada is falling short. And I think that if we want to continue to maintain competitiveness in this industry, we have a huge opportunity, and the time is now. And I think it really comes down to incentivizing not just research and development, and I take the point, Patrice, that that's a very important part of it. But you're absolutely right. Like, your points about moving this now, and even in the battery world, and in the developing an electric vehicle here in Canada, for not just Canada but for the world. We need real incentives. We need real practical things to start driving this forward, that are not necessarily task forces, but definitive goals to push this forward. So an example would be companies that are making batteries today are looking for places to grow their business and attracting those businesses to Canada with various different things. One of them is having the raw materials to supply the battery manufacturing. Another could be incentives from on the government level to get them here. But those types of practical things I think are needed now. They need to be put in place now, or we will miss the boat on this. And in the 2-year time frame, in my opinion, the battery supply chain is being established, and in 2 years it'll be well established, and the opportunity will be lost. So I think that acting now with real practical solutions is where we need to move.
All right, cool. Thanks, Chris. That's very insightful. So 2 years is the time frame that Chris is suggesting before things get locked out and we lose the competitiveness. Samantha, you run the CIM very recently as the president, and you did a lot of great work there, especially with the pandemic going on. And CIM historically, meet and greet, and did a good job. And thanks for that. When we talk about mining and processing, not really the manufacturing side of it, what do you think needs to happen to streamline the process and reduce the time frame like that Chris is talking about?
Mm-hmm. Well, Theo, that's a $1 billion question. It's no surprise, right? Our resources are located in inconvenient remote locations across this country, particularly those critical minerals. And so that's the challenge, really, is how do we leverage, synergize, work together to get roads in place, road or rail. How do we get ports to some of those sites that are located along our coastlines, and how do we get access to energy to power up those mines and those processing plants on those sites? And so I think those are some of the challenges, and the solutions are working with the provinces, the territories, with the federal government for helping to streamline and fast track some of those infrastructure, if you like to call it, opportunities to help those mines get up and running. I think, along with that, we have this license to operate. When you survey the CEOs, when you survey the EY survey that comes out, you see quite clearly license to operate is their number one risk. And that to me means that, there's certainly political uncertainty. There's certainly added scrutiny, if you like, from society, from the communities that are in and around these mining sites. And I would say even from our customers, we're hearing from, the Elon Musks of the world that, he wants to buy green metals, and rightly so, right? So only wants to deal with those ESG high level top shelf mining companies. And so, that is all part of the challenge. And so for me, I would say that the opportunity with Canadian miners is to really leverage the great work that they've been doing in this regard, I would say engaging with Indigenous communities, engaging with the communities that are next door, looking for those win-win opportunities. I would say, even on the investment side, getting access to capital for these massive projects, that we have this ESG index now that people are referencing. So where they put their money, where they are investing in, they're looking at investing it in these companies that are environmentally sustainable and have high governance due diligence in their operations. So I think those are some of the keys to helping us to get there. I think even rethinking how how we do our designs. Can we use small modular reactors? Can we build them on barges and bring them in and hook them up to a power grid, a microgrid, to get those sites up and running? I think there are technologies, Theo, and I know that we've been slow to adopt as an industry, and it's starting to pick up pace. And no better way than a burning platform that we need these mines on stream now. We need to supply those raw materials for those plants. If you're looking at a 50% increase in nickel over the next 9 years, that's a lot of exploration, let alone getting those mines up and running and producing the product. So I think on those sides, we have an opportunity. Operating cost, productivity, that to me goes hand in hand with the opportunity for the technology that many of those on the call today are the ones that are looking at those opportunities for the mining industry and bringing down our operating costs to allow us to be really competitive. So I just stop there, but I would say there's definitely opportunity for us to move faster than we have in the past.
Yeah, thanks, Samantha. I mean, you and I talk a lot about innovation and digital transformation in the sector. So yeah, right on point there. Brendan, we know that, Mark produced this document that actually identifies all these minerals that we use in our day-to-day life in the low carbon economy we already started living in. And you are somewhat of the voice of the producers for Canada. What do you think about what has been said so far? And also, any commentary of what Honorable Minister Seamus O'Regan talked about?
Thanks for the question, Theo, and thanks for the organizers for the opportunity to contribute to the conversation today. There's a lot to unpack here. Let's just go back to the comment from Minister O'Regan about it's not just about the materials, it increasingly matters where they come from. Okay, let's talk about that for a moment. The whole impetus to drive transformation in the transportation sector toward battery electric vehicles is driven on a concern of the implications of global climate change. Okay, Canada has one of the cleanest electricity grids in the world, and therefore any industrial activity, including mining, that can connect to that grid will have a carbon competitive advantage. And we see that in the comparative carbon intensity performance of nickel production in Canada, of copper production in Canada, of cobalt production in Canada. We are global leaders in low carbon intensity production of minerals and metals that we currently produce. And for companies like Nouveau, Monde, and E3 and others that are going to be bringing projects online, that comparative carbon intensity advantage is one that's going to continue moving forward. And there's a bit of harmony there, right? So Samantha talked about, Elon Musk and what the Teslas of the world want. Well, we have, in many respects, what they want. They just need to make the decision to come and invest here. The government, which Minister O'Regan references, put a number of programs and policies on the table to try and attract that investment. All that's very positive. The question becomes, are we going to be able to deploy those policies and programs on a timeline that allows Canada to capture those critical investments? Okay, and on that point, I think that we have some strengths. We also have some challenges. If we look at the last large-scale base metal project that was brought online in Canada, that was Voisey's Bay. It was 13 years between the point of discovery and first production. All right. Current nickel mines in Canada have less than 13 years of available production left. So we're already on a critical path to permit new production just to maintain our status quo production levels. That's not including expansions to meet increased projected demand globally. So, and I think it was Chris that mentioned this, we need to focus on exploration. It's not an option. We need to find more of the minerals and metals that we know we have to be able to create a much more viable pipeline for projects that will become mines to meet that demand. That's one thing unequivocally that needs to happen. The last point that I would say, I participate in a number of these conversations around town. And there's always a bit of a discrepancy around how do we prioritize what segments of the supply chain to put in place first. I always tend to remind people on the basis of that question that in the BEV space, we already have fairly significant segments of the supply chain in place. We have nickel and cobalt production, we have smelting capacity, we have refining capacity. We don't have battery grade nickel and cobalt production yet. The government has made investment in the cobalt space. We currently have a gap in the nickel sulfide space. We have modest but increasing capacity in the mid-tier material manufacturing, cell packing area. And of course, we have a reasonably sizable downstream internal combustion engine segment of the manufacturing supply chain, the owners of which who have announced, collectively, I think it was about $6 billion to begin retooling those plants to make more BEVs. My sense is that anyone in the world will buy the battery grade materials that we produce. My personal view is I'd love for Canada to capture as much of that supply chain as possible. I believe that few other jurisdictions produce these materials as responsibly as operators in Canada do. So it's in everyone's best interest to do that. But if we were talking about where to allocate scarce resources with the least risk, if we bring more supply online, it will be sold downstream, whether in Canada or elsewhere. And that's a sure bet for investment into this supply chain.
Cool. Yeah, that was very thoughtful, Brendan. I'm just going to jump in between the audience questions and some of the questions we already had prepared. So a question about whether or not we should be looking for mining exploration, like we should explore for mines in close location to the potential clients. And this is more of a question around, transportation logistics. We know how wide Canada is, and we've already had, historical discussion around, the Ring of Fire in Ontario or the Plano in Quebec. I want to start with Samantha on this one. Should we prioritize exploration that are closer to town in some other ways or closer to the border? And what's your opinion about things like developing bigger areas like Ring of Fire or Plano to actually support new minerals?
Oh, gee, I wish we could have, we could find mineral resource and reserve right beside a refinery or close to the infrastructure that we have. I mean, the resources are where the resources are. I mean, that's the reality. From my experience with base metals, we often found, like for Vale, we often found that we would have a mine, an operation to a certain depth. When we explored in and around it, well, there was more material. And so I think there is a bit of a notion, if you can just continue to explore in the shadow of the headframe, as they say, there is good opportunity there. The closer the better, and I think it's the easier and the lower the cost if it's close to infrastructure. And I think on the other hand, we do know that we can run successful. You mentioned Voisey Bay, right? So we do have an opportunity to run these operations that are on the coastline quite effectively and efficiently, and so that those may be other prime target areas that we can get to in the middle of the James Bay lowlands. That seems to be a bit of a challenge to get that up and running. And again, it goes back to, I think, some of the Indigenous relations engagements and working with the communities that are nearby. So I would say there's that as well, and just leveraging that kind of knowledge and experience that we've had so far, and using that and doing a much better job than we have in the past. I mean, you talked about 13 years at Voisey Bay, and some of that was really because of engagement, or not understanding what the engagement process was with the Innu and the Inuit that were in that area. And I think that's learnings that we have as Canadians that we can certainly bring forward.
Thanks, Samantha. And Patrice, there's a question here that you probably want to answer. It's about the investment that is needed to develop technology so that we can extract and separate some of these critical minerals. The question, Patrice, is what effort do you think the federal and provincial government should be making to help move the development of these technologies along? I mean, you guys started Nouveau Monde Graphite. You may have some practical examples and situations you can share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. In our case, I mean, the total investment will be around $1 billion. 1/3 of it is for the mining exploration. And luckily for us, we're only an hour and a half driving distance from the St. Lawrence River and about 2 hours driving distance to Montreal. So we must be the luckiest mining company in Canada. But that being said, the refining part, which has never been done in Canada, to bring graphite to a form and a shape that it can be used on an anode, needs to be developed. So we were also, once again, lucky enough to attract talents that could help us bridge this. But as you may know, doing it in the lab is one part of the story. What you really need to do is demonstrate it as a demonstration size unit that has a sufficient throughput so that the scale-up factor is not scaring investors afterward. And I think this is where Canada plays an interesting role. We have used STDC for some of our projects because they are actually addressing a key problem, is this pre-commercialization step, where you have to build a demonstration unit. And from that point on, you become much more credible for the investors community and for also customers. And then from that point on, you move ahead. And this is, I think, the fortunate thing about Nouveau Monde these days is we have bet on this, building large demonstration unit, and the community is recognizing it. Our customers are coming, visiting our facilities, and acknowledging that we are capable of doing it. If you do it too small scale, you won't get the recognition, and you won't be able to commercialize your capacity. So that's, I think, where Canada needs to continue and improve this aspect.
Cool. Thanks, Patrice. That's very thoughtful. Chris, one question that is probably closer to you is, given the current minerals being used to build the EV batteries, what would be your estimated availability of these resources in Canada, like in terms of full supply chain? I'm guessing, is it 10 years? Is it 50 years? Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, can you say that again? What's the estimated?
How long is it going to take before we have all that value chain available in Canada?
Yeah, I think from the mineral side, there's a lot of companies that are advancing projects right now. E3, Nouveau Monde, they're a bit further down the chain. He's absolutely right. I mean, a critical piece to anything is doing some sort of demonstration, and E3's demonstration is going to be next year. We're aiming for 2025. We have a bit of advantage. We're not mining lithium. We're producing it out of wells. So we move a bit quicker from that sense. So that the raw materials, I think, is advancing. I think in the next 5 years, you're going to see a couple of really good projects across the battery material supply chain. So graphite, us hopefully with lithium. There's cobalt being developed that's in its advanced stages, and then all the other ones that are more commonplace like nickel and copper that Canada already has quite a few operations running. But from the bigger battery value chains outside mineral projects, there are some new projects that have come up that are really interesting. A couple in Quebec. Looking at developing battery supply, either cathode or even some EV manufacturing. I think Ford is looking at manufacturing some EVs in Ontario. So there are pieces of it, but it's just not prevalent. And one of the things that we are trying to do today as a company in Alberta, we have cobalt salts and nickel salts being produced in Fort Saskatchewan, and with lithium, we have the main raw materials here. We're trying to get a battery manufacturer to come to Alberta, and you're talking about local supply chain, inventing new technology, pioneering a new cathode or a new cathode company, it's difficult and it's very time consuming. And there are some companies in Canada doing it that are ahead of the game, and I would love to see them get commercial operation running, just like E3's his goal is to do the same. So, but outside that, the broader market is already out there, and trying to get some of those companies on our soil to manufacture those materials brings that a lot closer in terms of time frame. And I think it's incredibly important. So I think that the 5-year window is reasonable. I think the 10 to 15 is if you're more looking at developing new from scratch. It takes a lot longer for that innovation. Canada's great at innovation, absolutely fantastic at it. So it's definitely coming.
Okay, cool, thank you. Brendan, there's Mark is famous for educating all of us. So there's an education question here for Brendan. What's the difference between minerals you pull out of the ground and battery grade?
Thanks. Thanks for the question. So mineral deposits are found in multiple places and are often non-homogeneous, in the sense that there might be a particular concentration of nickel, there might be a concentration of copper, there might be a concentration of silver, of lead. There's a variety of different types of mineral deposits. The mining activity involves extracting those out of the ground, which then that ore moves through a variety of different value-added processes. The first stage of which is crushing, which makes the material processable. It's usually then concentrated to maybe 30 to 40% metal, with the balance of the material being other properties, some of which are desirable, others of which are environmental liabilities that need to be managed. That concentrate will then be sent to a smelter to be further value added, ultimately increasing the concentration of the particular metal that you're seeking. So for example, if this was a nickel mine in northern Quebec that would extract that ore, it'd be sent to Sudbury. After it was concentrated, that concentrate would be put in the smelter and elevated to around a 66% purity nickel matte. That matte would then be transported to a further purification facility to become about as pure metal as you can possibly get. And so at each stage of this process, you're removing some aspect of the ore and amalgamating the part of the ore that you want in a concentrating process. The battery grade metals follow that same line of thinking. It's just they require a different type of processing to create a particular type of nickel or cobalt or lithium or graphite product. Graphite, nickel, lithium can be manufactured through various different processing applications to create various different nickel products. For example, in your home, you may have a stainless steel stove or fridge. A huge input for nickel is creating stainless steel. The sort of token application of graphite would be, the pencils that children use at school. Granted, Nouveau Monde is not going into the mining industry to create pencils for kids at school. They're going to create a different graphite product that will allow electrification technologies to work on the basis of battery applications. So I hope that's helpful in providing a little bit of clarity around the difference between an ore body and the various stages through which those materials are processed to get to finished products.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. I'm gonna follow up with a separate question kind of related to some of the initiatives that Mark has been doing for many years now. So there's a question around the ESG reputation, but I want to frame it a different way. You talked about the energy use that we have that is low carbon footprint. We can think about Quebec and and some of the hydropower. We know that we're going into this low carbon economy because we're tired of basically destroying the earth. But, you know, through MAC and some of the mining, through MAC and some of the support system around MAC, we created the TSM, right? The Towards Sustainability, Sustainable Mining. And then I think you guys did an update of it not long ago. Can you comment a bit about how that ESG baked in practical ways of doing mining in Canada can actually help the Canadian value chain on the battery metal be more valuable when we truly talk about low carbon economy?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. And thank you for the question, Theo. Many of us, well, in fact, all of us in our own ways are consumers, okay? Whether we're fully aware of it, minerals and metals inform the built environment, the technology that we consume, the homes we live in, the cars we drive, the computers we use, the device that you're consuming this content on right now, the list goes on. Increasingly, and this is not a new trend, but it's one that's important and gaining steam, increasingly, consumers are concerned and asking questions about how and through what practices the materials that end up in the products that they use are extracted, what the implications are on a social basis, on an environmental basis, and what actions and activities companies are or aren't taking to ensure that best practice of environmental stewardship, community stewardship, and respect are deployed and undertaken. Towards Sustainable Mining is a program that in many respects provides information on those topics in a form of accountability and transparency framework. So let's just take one example. You talked about the climate change example. I see comments in questions in the panel around other environmental liabilities like tailings management. In the program writ large, there are 30 indicators that companies report their practice on. Several of them are found in what's called the climate change protocol, which you correctly said was just updated. So how does TSM work? In the climate change protocol, there are indicators that touch on various responsibilities that companies have that define best practice. In each of those areas, companies will make a commitment, a target, and they will aspire to achieve that target, okay? They will then report against their progress toward achieving that target. And then periodically they will be verified by an external third party, okay? So an independent third party will come in, will verify that company's reporting against its own progress on its own target in accordance with this program. Both of those reports will be made public. So for example, if any of the members in the audience today had questions around a particular company's performance in meeting energy efficiency targets for one of their mine sites, or environmental stewardship tailings targets, or community engagement with respect to Indigenous engagement, they can go to the MAC website and they can look at these sites, because it's reported on the basis of the mine site. They can go to our website and find these reports and ask questions and inform themselves on the basis of independently verified practice for these companies. And this goes a long way to answering questions and providing a greater level of assurance that many consumers and companies are seeking. And the nearest term example that I would provide is that, so many people might be watching this video, this webinar on an Apple device. Apple, in their global procurement policy, referenced towards sustainable mining as a best mining practice, and that they would aspire to source the materials for their technologies from mine sites that deploy towards sustainable mining. And so what we're seeing here is a recognition from large manufacturers of various different technologies of this standard as a way to deliver the confidence that their customers are seeking for best practice in the mining space.
Okay. Yeah, that was good. Thanks, and that was a good question too from the audience, because it allowed us to talk a bit about TSM, which is a Canadian-made game changer for ESG practices. Samantha, I'd like to come back to you and ask one question about how do you see what's the next, let's say, 2 milestones that you think it's going to be important for us to achieve in the next couple of years to support the development of the value chain in battery metals on the mining and processing side?
Okay, I think I see a couple things. I'm putting on CIM hat here, right?
Yeah.
And what CIM does really well is best practices and guidances. And I think it would be really cool if we could put together a guidance document on what is clean metal. Like, what is clean green metal? What do you have to achieve in terms of, I don't know, carbon reduction, environmental footprint reduction? I think that would be really helpful. And then it shows, I think, not only to mining companies how you do this, but also around the world, the benefits of the Canadian miners and the great work that we're doing. I think that would be fun to put and very helpful to put together. I also think that it's probably I don't even know if this is possible, but I come from a world where we build life of mine plans, right?
Yes.
And so if we could build a life of Canada plan, I don't know what it is, but just, focusing on our minerals and metals that we produce, how much it costs, and think about it from an EV perspective. And what does that even look like? So I saw somebody ask the question, do we even have enough metals in Canada to support this EV revolution? I wouldn't be able to answer that. I don't know. And so I thought, something that uses a lot of data and science and AI and the type of really smart people that we have here on the call and in Canada and around the world, like, how do you build that kind of model to help us as a country to identify where those priorities are? Anyway, kind of way out there, but I think those are maybe something that we could pull together if we all.
I actually like both of them. I mean, I was explaining to some clients out of Canada how we came about with the NR 43-101, and it became like the gold standard of how you disclose minerals. And I like the idea of actually doing the same for what defines clean metals or clean minerals, so that we actually work from the same. And also understanding what do we have. It's true, we have a lot of maps and colorful deposits, but how much is economically viable in the era of battery metals is key. Actually, think these are hopefully the minister is listening to this event, because these are cool things that they should be sponsoring.
Yeah,
cool. Chris, I consider you to be one of the, what I call it, the low carbon economy entrepreneur for mining and metals. What do you think needs to be done to achievable milestone in the next couple of years in your world?
Sorry, was that for me?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you said Patrice. Okay.
No, I said Chris. You new age entrepreneur,
Yeah.
like you're the low carbon economy entrepreneur now for battery, right? So what do you think is needed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is an absolutely critical piece of this story is, the low carbon side, and it takes best practices changing across the globe. It's not just, changing one piece of the story or implementing one small thing. It is a mindset change. I know that, electrifying mining fleets, there's discussions on that ongoing right now, which is actually where I thought you were asking Patrice about this. It's a really good start to the movement of the EV is just is a good proxy to the same story. It's the battery just enables you to use energy differently, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can get off hydrocarbon pure transport in the EV sense, and you can go to something that's electric, now the power that you put into that, there is a carbon footprint to that, right? But that carbon footprint can evolve, because now you can go to, we talked about the micro reactors. You can start implementing other sources of energy and use that. And so the battery to me is purely just a transition from one phase of transport to another. And I think that the mining industry has the same sort of process mentality that needs to be deployed, is that we need to do this. We need to start the transition. And, you know, E3, we're trying to lead that. Right now, the majority of our energy, 99% or so of the energy that project will consume is electricity. And that's because we run electric pumps to move our fluid around, which is our resource. And the process to make hydroxide at battery grade is electrolysis, which is electric. And so, you know, looking at that, if you're in Alberta, we don't have access to the same amount of hydropower that BC or Quebec does, but we have plentiful and very inexpensive natural gas. So the mindset then is to deploy carbon sequestration technology that's running locally here to drop our carbon footprint to net zero. And that's the project goal, is to have a net zero lithium product because of the things that we've been talking about on this call today, but how important that is from the perspective of the OEMs looking down on this, from what they're putting into their cars, and that mindset. But that's also, it's not just them, it's also where the funds are. Eventually, we talked about capital to build projects. You're going to have to find that capital on the market somewhere to finance a project, to build it, to get it operational. And that's one of the biggest hurdles a company like us and like Nouveau have, is to finance a project. If you have an opportunity to get to a net zero product, I think you open up the opportunity to bring in the new mindset of funds as well. There's a growing prevalence of big funds having ESG mandates, specifically focusing on carbon. It's the one that people pick on the list as an easy metric to evaluate you by, and for good reason, right? But those funds also, you know, a critical piece of this is the mindset changing there too. So I think it is a gradual step. It is just moving towards, you know, at the end of it, putting in best practices that eventually will lead to a full-scale reduction in carbon in the mining industry. But it doesn't happen day one, and there's certainly no switch to go from carbon emitting to no carbon. It just doesn't happen like that.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. Patrice, you guys started production not long ago. You've seen different ecosystem around you as you went into production. In the next couple of years, what are the key achievable milestones that either you think Nouveau Monde Graphite needs to get to, or as an ecosystem of value chain players, what else do you think we as an ecosystem should participate in the next couple of years?
Definitely. I mean, I want to segue on Chris's point is if we can show the rest of the world how we can extract, refine, and process mineral in the greenest way or fashion, I think that will put us way ahead of competition. Nouveau Monde, as it's known, it's been part of our DNA since day one to have a carbon-free process from the pit or from the mine to the battery. Not simple. I mean, Chris touched that point earlier on. I mean, we have an open pit operation. For underground mining operation, it's rather easy to justify electrifying equipment. For an open pit, it's been unheard of. And when we approach people, they were looking at it a little bit strangely 2 years ago because they could not believe that this could be materialized. Today, we are receiving phone calls because they realize that this is where it's going now, and they realize that we are able to justify it on a dollar basis, that it is possible. So I think such development work is now influencing the rest of the mining industry around the world, saying, okay, if these guys can do it, I think we have to do it. Otherwise, we will lose this differentiation that we are used to have in our favor, having low-cost labor or low-cost energy. All of a sudden, it's no longer this game. It's what's the lowest carbon footprint. And it's been mentioned also that investors are now looking more deeply into this because some of the funds are specifically defined for that kind of operation. At first, they were not looking in the mining industry because that was kind of the scary thing that no way they can be green. But all of a sudden, you see more and more projects that are being developed around a zero carbon footprint. And I think that's a key milestone because now the end user wants to have a carbon-free product. The customers want to have it. Then the suppliers have no choice to do it. And then the mining, finally, at the end, has no other option than to go in that bandwagon as well. And this is what we see. So I think from a milestone perspective, I think the mining industry should embrace this change and really work in that direction, at least the new projects that will arise. I mean, it's understandable, sorry, that for existing project, it may not be simple to convert, but for the future project, I think that should be a must. And I think the Canadian regulation should also encourage such development work. It may not put a longer timeline into it because already the equipment manufacturer have adapted to it. Infrastructure, one way or the other, can be adapted. So I think it's just a new mentality that we need to put in place to really shape the future into a greener economy.
Cool. All right, thanks, Patrice. We have 3 minutes left, so I'm going to ask each panelist to say last words, 30 seconds or less. Let's go with Brendan first.
I'd say the opportunity is great, but the window is closing and jurisdictions are acting quickly. We need to see the federal government deploy the tools that they've given themselves to bring these types of investments to Canada as expediently as possible.
Cool. Samantha?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think this is all around the quality of life that we enjoy here in Canada. So this is around making a really great economic engine for our country, great jobs, great tech, and doing the right things for the planet and sustainability of our planet. It's the right thing to do. Great jobs, come into the mining industry, right? I just think that this is an opportunity too big to be missed.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I echo those comments exactly. I think this is an opportunity that's too big to be missed. We have everything we need here. We just need to put all the pieces together now, and go, and really go. Not just talk about going, but really put the pedal to the metal, so to speak. To use a pun from EVs. But it's there. It's all there, and I think I'm excited. I'm excited to be part of something new in Canada, and while doing something old. So it's kind of fun in that way, and I'm excited to see where we can grow this and be a major part to play in something global.
Cool. Patrice?
I think this is the opportunity that Canada has to reduce dependency on foreign countries. Simple as that. I mean, we have the raw material. It's for many years to come. It's not going to be a cheap labor battle. It's really going to be how to secure raw material to be able to produce those goods that will be used for electrifying the economy. And not only EV, but I think ESS, so energy storage systems, will become a dominant player also into this field, and will just add even more stress on those supply chains. So Canada should be putting itself in the right position.
Wonderful panelists, very insightful, clearly the brain power of the mining and metal sector right now. I'll pass the mic back to Nino to say a few words.
Excuse me. Thanks very much, Theo. And I'd like to add my thanks to the panel for just a fantastic discussion, and a big thanks to you, Theo, for so well moderating the discussion today. It's been a terrific amount of education and insight that we've gained. A recording of the event will be posted on the Electric Autonomy website within the next couple of days, so please look out for that. I would also like to acknowledge once again our presenting sponsor, Invest in Canada, for coming on board to support this series, and also our episode sponsor, Frontier Lithium Inc. Next week, our 4th episode will be moderated by Ryan Castello, Managing Director of Adamas Intelligence. That session will be focused on active materials and cells, and Ryan will be exploring with expert panelists on how we get Canada manufacturing. It's free to register on the Electric Autonomy website, and we look forward to seeing you next week.